Hello and welcome to this edition of Wi-Fi Soft training videos. In this video, we are going to explore how to configure different policies inside UniBox controller. The policies help you define how the users or what kind of user experience the group of users are going to get when they connect to through the UniBox controller. Um, we have explored in our earlier video about the web filtering policy. So the web filtering policy applies to a group of users and certain URLs are filtered out for those users. In this video, we will explore how to set up bandwidth related policies for a group of users. So to configure the different policies, log into the UniBox dashboard and go under the control section. In that, you will find a menu called policies, and below those you'll find four different types of policies: the date and time policy, the relogin policy, the variable bandwidth policy, and the fair usage policy. So let's explore each of those policies one by one. The date and time policy. The date and time policy basically is a policy where a group of users can be restricted from using the internet service for a given period of time. It could be a day of the week, or could be the hour of the day. So when you define this policy and you specify that the policy is active on a group of users, then the users will get access to the internet resources only during that time which is allowed by this policy. So let's see how to add a new policy. To add a new policy, click on the plus sign and a pop-up menu appears. So you first enable the policy and next you give it a name. Let's say we'll call it student policy, and you select a group of users on which this policy is going to apply. So in this we will select that this is going to apply to students, and since the students only are there during the weekdays, we'll select the day of the week only from Monday to Friday. And then assuming that, let's say, the school is open from 9 a.m. in the morning to 4 p.m. in the evening. So we will define the policy so that the time period during which the students will get access to the network. So once you define this policy, you will go ahead and save this and the policy will get applied. So similarly, you can set up a similar policy for another group of users. So when these users connect to the network, they will only get access in the time period or the day of the week specified as per the policy. Now let's look at the next policy. We call it the relogin policy. This is often deployed in places where you want to restrict how many times the user comes to the network or spends on the network. So classic example would be restaurants or coffee shops where people spend more than a certain amount of time on the network. To configure this policy, again click on the plus sign and you again give it a name and give it a good policy name called relogin policy. And this time you want to define it for, let's say, a group of people, and then you define, let's say, a person is allowed to log in for 10 times per day, and after those many logins his bandwidth automatically will drop down to 256 kilobits per second. So what it essentially means that the user can keep connecting to the network for a certain amount of time, and then after that will automatically degrade his bandwidth. Now let's explore the third policy, which is called the variable bandwidth policy. In the variable bandwidth policy, again you click on the plus sign to get the dialog box, and again you apply it on a group of users, and here you specify that you want to degrade the user's bandwidth to a lower amount after he has spent 60 minutes on the connection on your network. So basically, if you want to make sure that a particular group of users don't sit in your premises and watch YouTube videos or high speed videos for hours together, you can basically enforce this policy on those group of users and or automatically restrict them from using your bandwidth on your network. The last policy is the fair usage policy. In the fair usage policy is commonly used by internet service providers where they allow you to use certain amount of bandwidth and after that automatically degrades your bandwidth because you're using too much of data. So again, to configure this policy, click on the plus sign and enable the policy. And select the group on which you want to enforce this policy. So what it essentially says here is that, let's say you are going to allow a student to use maximum of 1 GB of data per day, which is more than enough for his regular use. But if the user is streaming or downloading huge amount of videos or hacked content, you can actually enforce this policy and then automatically drop down the user's bandwidth to 512 kilobits per second so that they don't misuse the internet. So by defining this policy on the student group, that means all the students will be allowed 1 GB of data in the day. After this, the bandwidth will automatically drop down without the user having to log out to 512 kilobits per second. So once these policies are enforced, these get applied to the group of users when they log in, and the users automatically will inherit or will be enforced with the restrictions placed in the policies. This completes our policy section. Uh, Feel free to check out our other videos. Until then, thank you so much.